All right. Before we introduce our very special guest, just got a couple of things to say first. We've got one milestone this week. That's Grant Potter doing his 600th game in the goals. So well done to Grant. Obviously with most of our finals starting this week and Div 1 final starting the week after, there's a lot less appointments. So if you don't have a game, I'll make sure that your message before the appointments go out so you're aware, but there's only going to be one game per umpire for each weekend from here on in. A reminder about the social media policy. We've had a huge week with the league, obviously with the Supreme Court case, with the transgender issue, with other clubs and coaches sort of losing the plot a bit. It's just good to see that we didn't have umpires get on social media or jump in the media and have their say. If you've got any concerns about anything that's going on, get in touch, but make sure you take it through the right channels and don't get yourself in trouble. Got some association functions coming up this Wednesday night, barbecue after training. There's a schnitzel night coming up. Then there's other events coming up in September and October. That'll be in the coaching notes, so make sure you take note of that. And that's all for things I need to say. So I didn't want to waste too much time on that. We do have an incredibly special guest online today. He's been very kind to put aside some time to speak to us. Most of you know that we've got Matt Stevic joining us this afternoon. Matt umpired his first AFL game back in 2004. He's umpired well over 400 games. He can tell us exactly how many in a moment. But the incredible stat, which indicates how well he's regarded, is he's umpired 9 of the last 10 AFL grand finals. That's every grand final for the last 10 years except for 2013. So just an amazing record. He's number 9 if you weren't aware of that. We've got half an hour to have a chat about his career and his work outside of umpiring and life in general. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome to the Zoom meeting Matt Stevic. Matt, might need to unmute yourself, mate. I muted everyone before, so.
There you go. No, thanks for having us. Always love to be involved, regardless of the state. Love to get back and chat to some ump groups. So, yeah, looking forward to answering any questions that anyone wants to throw at me, and I'll try my very best to answer them as well as I can.
Yeah, excellent. So I've given a very short, brief summary of your background. Maybe in a bit more detail, you can tell us how it all started and what you've done throughout the years.
Yeah, look, I mean, I grew up in a small country town, Leongatha, South Gippsland. Most probably have never heard of that place, but loved sport as a kid. Played a lot of sport. Really took up umpiring through a family friend. I was 12 and his son was 12, and we were tiny, so we would actually share one side of the boundary. My first game, I borrowed my pa's grandfather's socks, and it was at Poo Wong of all places. And that sort of, look, I really did it just as a bit of a hobby. And then after year one, I thought I'll try the field, and had a great advisor. And as I'm sure a lot on this call can relate to, I was really lucky. I had a lot of senior umpires, really great local people that threw their arm around me, mentored me, gave me plenty of advice, protected me, helped me learn an awful lot, because I knew very, very little as a 13, 14-year-old. So that sort of started sort of early 90s, and then sort of 18, 19, probably a bit before that, I really set my sights on trying to make a career out of it. I really didn't know what AFL meant, to be honest, when I was 15 or 16, but I had this dream to hopefully one day, aspire to do a league game. And so just worked my way up through the VFL and had 5 or 6 years with the state league, and was fortunate enough to make the AFL list at the beginning of 2004. So it's flown. Reading out 400 plus games just means I'm old or getting there. But yeah, look, it's been one heck of a ride, and now got 2 little daughters in my life. So the parents out there can relate to a 10-month-old and a 2-year-old. So that's what I'm experiencing at the moment, learning to be a decent father. So that's sort of in a nutshell. Moved to Melbourne after school, completed a couple of university degrees, one with David Parkin famous former coach and player. So I did that. And then I spent 8 years teaching, 8 or 10 years teaching. And now I just do some portfolio stock market management stuff in and around the kids and the footy.
Yeah, nice. Couple of young kids. That's you're going to certainly find out what life's all about. How are you finding the sleepless nights?
I'm hiding up in our front room upstairs, so I can't hear them cry, even though one was very vocal just a minute ago. But look, I have to say, we've been really fortunate. Both girls, after about 14, 15 weeks, sleep through the night. I shared that with my brother, and he just about killed me, given his 3 kids hardly slept. But and no secret for us, I think we just got lucky. But taking our first child away at 13 weeks to the Gold Coast before COVID 2020 was a bit of a jump into the unknown. First time parents, a 13-week-old. We had zero idea how she was going to cope and all that sort of stuff. But we've generally been fairly lucky when it comes to the sleep.
So I mentioned your amazing record at AFL level. What's a couple of the games that stick in your mind as your highlights, some of the great grand finals that you've been involved in?
Yeah, good question. I think, probably the highlight would be Collingwood-Essendon, not if you're a Collingwood fan, but Anzac Day, I think it was 2009, Zaharakis kicked that goal. Essendon were down by 3 goals. It started raining, and they happened to kick 3 late in the game with 95,000. And I have to say that the atmosphere for the Anzac Day games probably is a bit better than the grand finals. And I guess when you've got a lot of corporates on grand final day, there's cheering. But Collingwood, Essendon, Anzac Day, sort of 50,000 diehard supporters of each. That probably is the highlight. Last year's grand final, even though it was a blowout, was for close to 3 quarters was a really challenging but fantastic game to be a part of in a unique setting. And then, I've had my last 3 games at the G have been Collingwood, Essendon, the kick after the siren to win the game from Elliott. The one on the weekend, Carlton, Melbourne. So if you're a Blues fan, you're probably still trying to get over that one. And even Brisbane, Richmond, a few weeks ago when Brisbane had them on toast for a half and then stopped playing footy, and Richmond, rolled them at the end. So they're probably a few that stick in my mind.
Yeah, there's been some amazing games this year. And I guess one of the questions I was going to ask you, in the lead up to a big game, it's going to be a big game. How do you approach it? I guess you're going to say it's like any other game, but you'd surely be aware of the significance of some games.
Oh, absolutely. I was chatting to my coach today, and even the Essendon Collingwood the other week, where, a one-sided game, in all due respect, in Hobart or, Canberra, where there's 12,000 fans versus 90,000 at the G, you could umpire out of your skin for 3.5 quarters. But if you stuff up something badly in the last few minutes of a tight game, that's footy, and that's all people remember. So you are sort of you are aware of, I guess, the enormity of it, and you do try and approach it like any other game. The reality is the fallout or the follow-up stories from those bigger games, naturally there's going to be more press, there's more people covering it, more people talking about it. So I've always just tried to, Cole, prepare really well. My attitude has always sort of been, I'm never ahead of the game. I sincerely mean that. There's still things that I, get annoyed at myself with, for things I could do better next time or do different. But I'm also accepting that the game at any level is really hard to adjudicate, and that's for all of us. So sort of accepting, perfection's probably unrealistic. You aim to be excellent at what you do, and, that drive to keep, performing as well as you can, I think just allows you to focus on that rather than, the what ifs that might come from a game.
Yeah, I knew we were having a chat tonight. Obviously, I watched Saturday night with great interest. One of your big strengths has been your composure, your ability to perform under pressure. And you had that last play when Melbourne kicked their second last goal, probably had the last goal too, I would have thought. And you were right in focus of the camera. And I was thinking, what is going through your mind in those moments?
Yeah, well, I think it was Melksham outmarked 3 or 4 opponents. And I mean, look, you learn, certain techniques as you well know over time. It certainly wasn't a strength, years ago, but you learn through, I guess, your mistakes and your stuff ups. But in that moment, I think, I ran in, paid the mark, and then I think he was being held a little bit after the mark, but he was passive, so it wasn't 50. He swung his arm back. I think McGovern fell to ground like he'd been shot. So, just having the ability to keep a little bit of distance away. I mean, I was pretty close, but, I had to contend with that. And then there's obviously 5 or 6 guys in and around the protected area. So, I think your preparation is a big thing because you don't expect to play the whole game out in your head before it starts. But I think being able to just slow things down in your head and probably early days when I got challenged by players, I would always feel like I had to provide an answer straight away. That's sort of immediacy. But I guess this is a good example the other night where, there was no urgency to respond or to give a player an answer or to react in an unnecessary way. So, again, I think once you've been exposed to truckloads of examples, some you've done well and some you haven't, you learn from them and you try and implement that going forward.
Yeah, I guess the experience does help. But one of the other big moments this year was the final moments of the Sydney, was it Richmond game?
Yeah,
when as the out-of-zone umpire, you were giving advice to the umpire in control. You had to give answers and you were being mic'd up and, you remained composed and were able to direct the umpire in charge what had to be done. Take us back to that game.
You've had a few tight ones. That was, and look, Johnny Howarth was the umpire in the spot. To give people just a very quick snapshot, if you weren't aware, Johnny had a boundary throw in on the wing, was contested. I called a support free kick, and then a millisecond later, the siren went, and a Sydney player kicked the ball into the crowd. So, in any other occasion, regardless of siren or not, because the support free kick was paid and then, the siren went, I didn't have an opportunity to, or John didn't have an opportunity to, I guess, stop the player from disposing. It was and would always be just reset where the mark is. But John had 30,000 people screaming in his ear. He had Jack Rewalt deciding that his advice was the best advice, which was pay 50. And if he said that once, he said that about 15 times. So poor Johnny, and I say poor Johnny, I thought he handled it probably as well as, anyone would when he's hearing different things in his mic. He thought he heard pay 50. He tried to clarify that. And so that's when Brendan Hosking and I, just made sure and were clear with him, no, that's not 50. It's a set kick from where it is. And, they in the end, they didn't kick the score. But, I mean, fortunately, we got the right outcome for the game. But, yeah, that's never happened to me in my 20-odd years of footy. I hope it doesn't happen again.
The game just throws up different things all the time. The other interesting thing from just this last weekend is I took particular note of the fact of Jamie Broadbent, who's a young South Australian umpire who's now living in Melbourne, had a huge game for him. So I would imagine that would have been a pretty daunting experience for someone at his stage of his career. What role do you play with him before the game and during the game?
Yeah, it's a fine balance. I mean, my mantra has always been, and this is just my philosophy, it's not for everyone, but, if I can make my teammate better, naturally, that's going to reflect well on me too. And I don't do it for that reason, but all us that have umpired can appreciate, doing it on your own is damn tough. So having a teammate by your side who you just know trusts you, has confidence in you. I've umpired a bit with Jamie this year, and I've been super impressed with his development, his willingness to learn. I was down at Geelong with him last week in the St Kilda game, where he just had some fantastic passages that showed for me that he's going to be, a long term and hopefully successful umpire. So I just try and instill where I can some confidence and belief, and throughout the game, if I notice some things that are done particularly well, I love to call it out and give that positive reinforcement, because, I was there once and had Darren Goldspink and the guys. Darren would probably deliver it in a bit different way to how I try and deliver it, but nonetheless, he was certainly supportive in my younger years. So, yeah, I just try and give him some confidence and belief, and that plays a small part, hopefully.
Yeah, no, I thought you guys did a great job as a team on Saturday night. I know guys will have a eager to ask questions, so I'll just ask a couple more before I hand over to the group. I'm sure you hate being in the news. It's as an umpire, you just want to stay out of the spotlight, but it's just happened to be in the last 12 months. You've had the whole Toby Green report. You've had the Jack Ginnivan free kick. You seem to have, and that end of the Sydney game we talked about, it just seems you've found yourself in the really controversial moments. How do you handle all the talk, the conjecture, the spotlight on you during the week that follows?
What was the Green incident? I can't remember that. No. It's a really, and I've been, I was going to say pretty open. I've been really open with colleagues, family, close friends. It's damn hard, and I'm fairly hopeless when it comes to technology. So I don't have Twitter. I have Facebook and Instagram for my family, but that's sort of the extent of my social media. But, if I take it back to the Green incident, I mean, that was a huge story. And, I felt, even though I was in Tassie in an Airbnb, we were in lockdown because we had to spend a week there before going to Brisbane of week 2 of the finals. I still felt like I couldn't escape it. You had on that Monday, probably 10 to 12 different people within the AFL are ringing you, and not to be pains in the arse, but just to, it was a message from Andrew Dillon and Gill and the match review and our coach and colleagues, and getting calls from random people. And obviously I didn't answer those, but it was really hard. And even the Jack Ginnivan one, totally different sort of scenario. But, I think there's probably a belief once you've been around for a long time that you're completely bulletproof. I certainly don't go out trying to chase or read a story about myself, because I reckon 99.5% of it's probably negative. So, I think if you're doing that, you're not going to stay sane for too long in our sport. But really, look, I have to say my teammates, and coaches, they're the ones who are probably, and you guys can relate to this, unless you've umpired before, you really truly don't know what it's like and how to tolerate or cope with abuse or online threats and all those sorts of things. So when that happens, the thing that probably got me through reasonably okay was, some peers throwing their arms around me, and, because, a few people said, you were fantastic during that Toby Green tribunal hearing. Well, I have to say, I mean, I had a constant headache for 2.5 days, and I just felt like I was about to implode, to be honest, just with the pressures I felt, not so much on the external noise, more it was a huge case, and I was representing every umpire around Australia. That was my number one thing, and I hadn't reported it on the day, but I made very clear to Jeff Gleeson, and I said, am I able to say that now that I've looked at it, I don't think it's a good look for the sport, and I'd take different action if I saw it that way next time? And he said, absolutely, you can. So I was pleased that I was able to say that, because that's what I felt and what I believed in. And yeah, it was tricky, because I felt, like you're wearing a number of hats. You're representing the AFL, you're representing every umpire around Australia, the young boys and girls in particular who, cop these sorts of things, on a weekly basis. So, and then the Jack Ginnivan's another story, and I can share a couple of things about that later.
Oh, you may as well now.
Refresh my memory. What happened? No, I'll tell you. Look, it's really, I mean, I'll put on the record. I know you're recording this, so I need to be careful. But and this is probably, Cole, a bit of an old school approach. I think where we've gone with high tackles, I think we may have shifted a little bit too far. I think a duck where a player goes from high to low, I think most fans and umpires, players understand that a guy comes front on tackles. If he goes from 6'3" to 5'6", you can't expect the tackler to, at the last millisecond go lower. But pretty much outside of that, or the shrug, my philosophy's been pretty similar to Lee Matthews, and that's the tackler, going lower, and the onus should be on the tackler. But we're in the game to listen to instruction and to follow the instructions as best as we can. So going into round 19, we had some examples of Jack Ginnivan and probably, 10 other players from different clubs. And there's different techniques. Some use a drop, some use an arm lift, some use a combination of all of those. But I think, to be honest, going into that game in particular, we were probably on a bit of a hide into nothing. So the game comes around, quarter one, I see Jack lower subtly, so I call play on. There was some remonstration after that. Quarter time comes around, Scott McLaren, our coach, amongst other things, he just mentioned that incident, and he said, well done, you followed our instruction to a T, good call. So I didn't give it another thought. 9 o'clock that night, my coach, Michael Jennings, calls. Sometimes it's a good feeling and sometimes it's not when you get a call late on a Sunday night, I think it was. But he said, how'd you pull up? I just want to let you know the decision you made was exactly as we talked about. He's lowered, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, look, to be honest, my view has always been, I think we still should be protecting the head a bit more. But I understand, and I've been around a long time, that this is the direction we're going. We don't want players to try and draw high free kicks. Lunchtime, Monday comes around. I get another phone call. And I mean, this is just sharing this information so you guys, can get a bit of an inner sanctum understanding of sort of what goes on in reality. And Michael Jennings, he was really supportive across these days, but he said, we still believe it's a drop, but the second part of the tackle we think is unreasonable, or others involved in meetings this morning believe that's the case. And on that basis, we're going to come out and say that. The first part's okay, the second part's not. So, and then obviously all hell breaks loose. Lee Matthews, has some pretty strong words. And when Lee speaks, of course, you listen, and, it created a lot of debate around not so much Matt Stevic, the bad umpire, but more around where are the rules going? How hard is it for these guinea pigs to go out there on the weekend and adjudicate this? And all that sort of stuff. So, that's sort of where it is. To be honest, as I said, my coaches were in no way did they see it as a bad mistake or even really a mistake. But the powers that be decided that they needed to come out and make those calls. And I've been around long enough to know that there's sometimes some bigger things at play. But yeah, as I said, my personal view is I'd like us still to be, I'm sure everyone on the call who's umpired before, you've heard 30 years or 50 years or 10 years of protecting the ball player, and that's been rammed into my head for so long. So to sort of subtly shift that focus was pretty hard.
Yeah. Look, I think we also understand what they're trying to address and how difficult it is for everyone concerned. So yes, it's not an easy one. Now, we've got 10 minutes left. This Zoom has a time limit. So I'm going to open it up for some questions. We won't get a chance to get too many of them. Iggy Marianolis has put his hand up. Iggy, you want to unmute yourself and ask Matt a question.
Well, I'll just say again, I'm more than happy to do another one or two of these, and we can just do a Q&A for the whole 30 minutes. So feel free to hit me up.
Awesome.
Beautiful. Hey, Matt, firstly, thanks very much for your time this evening. It's very much appreciated from myself as an umpire and obviously our umpiring group. A couple of questions. First question relates to any advice for a young umpire, 18, 19, 20, who's going through the ranks in terms of wanting to pursue that pathway. What would be your advice for 18, 19, 20-year-old umpire? I've got a circumstance with a young fellow who lives with me who's a part of the Sanford Academy. So what would be your advice for umpire at that age?
I think yep. And what's the other question?
The second question would be about, I suppose, education of umpires and interpretations through the media. I know years ago, probably in the early 2000s, we had one of the umpires who was doing the commentary in terms of trying to explain the umpire's decisions. Do you feel that's something that would be worthwhile? Those Friday night games where Brian Taylor makes a big comment around a decision and an umpire's decision.
Yeah.
Would it be worthwhile or valid for us to maybe get some umpires on some commentary for a bit of education for the public, I suppose? Or
yeah, no, it's a good question. I'll answer that one first. Yeah, absolutely. I've always said there's a lot of a disconnect between the understanding of the rules. We're not going to educate everyone, but there can be various platforms that, be it myself as a current umpire or ex-umpire, you could do that on the commentary or on some other forum. So yeah, wholeheartedly agree. And all designed not to say Matt Stevick's right every time or Brett Roseberry, but just to educate people on the rules. Secondly, or your first question, the thing I think that helped me early days was I got into really good routines and prepared well. So there was much more to my life at that age than just umpiring. But I would prepare well. I would know my rules. I would train hard, and I would get into good routines. So when I slowly climbed the ladder to the VFL cadet squad and then the senior squad, other than actually umpiring different people and probably better quality footy, nothing too much changed. I'd already ingrained a lot of good habits, albeit I wasn't as fit, wasn't as well prepared or knowledgeable, but I think that's the real basis that you can then build on in terms of, experience over the years.
Yes, thanks so much for that, Matt.
Someone else want to jump on?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind jumping on. Hello, Matt, and congratulations on that quite amazing career. A couple of questions. We mentioned about some of the controversies Cole did this year. That the rule early in the year, the intent where umpires were very, very delicate when it came to giving 50s, etc., for any type of abuse. Yep. It was a big thing 6-7 weeks into the season, and then suddenly it just kind of really died out. Did you guys just get together and said, look, there's obviously a lot of controversy and all that, and because it kind of just completely disappeared from one week to the other?
Good question. No, we didn't just get together. The powers that be at the AFL, so that's led by Brad Scott. They obviously get a lot of inputs from, a lot of different sectors in the industry. We got a very clear direction that if a player, if they out and out still abuse you or are really demonstrative, they still wanted us to pay 50. But if a player, what they called checked themselves, so went to, wave their arms at you or come at you, but then sort of stopped, they said, we want you to allow that. So yeah, there was a shift. It came from above. Like any other free kick, though, I'm sure, we've paid some good ones since then, and we've probably missed some along the way as well. So trying to find that balance is critically important.
I reckon part of the other thing that's happened is the players have adjusted their behaviour too. So haven't needed to necessarily act as much.
And that's a great point, Cole. And I think it often gets, I've heard for 20 years, the umpires start round 1 and they're really hard on this rule, and then round 17, they forget about the rule, where your points are spot on one, and that is we get better at it, more accurate. players say, okay, I can't put a hand in the back anymore. Not that, I mean, that's permitted now, but so they adjust and therefore you pay less.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we've only got 4 minutes left. We've got a chance for one or two others to come on quickly.
Yeah, Matt, mate, I'm driving my car, otherwise I'd put myself on camera. Mate, two things. The first one is we had Jacob Mollison on a few weeks ago, and he did an interview with Abby Holmes, and that interview, like we all said to him, it came across, it was outstanding in the fact that the public were made aware of who you guys are and what you like and your passion for umpiring. So, mate, the more you can do that and talks like tonight, the better. The second one was, mate, and I'm sure I've got a memory from 2014, a massive mistake I made in a game. And I always look back to that point. Can you share with us a mistake you've made in a big game and like how you came back from it?
Yeah, it was a shocking call that probably an under 14 umpire wouldn't make. And again, I don't hide these things because I think, you know, you're in the game a long time. You're going to make some blues and you're going to make some bad ones. And I guess the very best just make few of them. It was actually the year I sat the bench, 2013. So I had what you would say a pretty, you know, an outstanding season. I finished 4th. Round 19, Carlton Essendon. 2 minutes into the game. So wasn't tired, fatigue, none of that. Ball got kicked from end zone to my zone. The umpire called touched, so touched off the boot. I paid a mark. The guy then threw him to ground, so I paid 50. So there's 2 big mistakes straight up.
Yeah.
He kicked a goal, and what was the winning margin? 6 points. So Mick Moldhouse for about 23 months reminded me of that. Not that I'm close to Mick, but so, you know, and round 18, 19, pointy end of the year, I'd had a great year, still managed to pick myself up and somehow get to 4th. So, you know, and I remember thinking at the time, I mean, for days, I just could not understand how I had such a brain fade. And what I've come to learn is sometimes that just happens. You hope it doesn't happen too much, but sometimes it just happens. And so for me, I thought, I got 2 or 3 more rounds here where I can sink or swim. And so I basically gritted my teeth, swallowed some pride. And look, I remember Rowan Saws was the coach and he was pretty good. He's like, I cannot believe you've made such a bad blue, but you've been pretty good for so long. So we're going to umpire you next week. And I was I said, drop me. If you do whatever you need, that is not acceptable at this elite level. But that's the obvious one. And I've made plenty more, but that's one where I look back on and think, look, maybe I would have snagged the GF that year, but I don't blame them for not picking me.
Awesome, Matt. Hey,
Thanks,
this
mate.
Zoom is about to run out. Thank you so much for your time. Quickly, what game you've got this week?
Brisbane, Melbourne. You can't. Can you extend it at all, Cole? At all?
I can't. With this link, I can't. We'll take up your offer next year to get you back if that's all right. But been awesome having you on. A great way to finish our season. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts.
No, pleasure, mate. And as I said, if it's before then, more than happy to. And good luck to everyone. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, and we'll be following you and wishing you well for the finals. It's a huge game this Friday night again. They give you the big ones every week, don't they?
I've done a few in front of 7,000, so I don't know how big those games were, but a game's a game.
Yeah, absolutely. All the best, and thanks once again. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Cole.
And for the rest of you guys, we'll keep in touch via email from here on in, and we'll see you at training on Wednesday night.